On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister and the Minister for Finance and Corporate Governance of Antigua and Barbuda for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will now hear a statement by His Excellency Timothy Harris, the Prime Minister, Minister for Sustainable Development, National Security, People Empowerment and Constituency Empowerment of St. Kitts and Nevis. May I request protocol to escort His Excellency. So I have great pleasure in welcoming the Prime Minister for and Minister for Sustainable Development, National Security, People Empowerment and Constituency Empowerment of St. Kitts and Nevis, His Excellency Timothy Harris, and I invite him to address the General Assembly.
Mr. President, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the government and people of our proud Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, I extend congratulations on your appointment as President of the United Nations General Assembly, and I thank you for the honor of addressing the 71st session of the General Assembly. Mr. President, we know that under your tenure, the focus will be to strive towards those key Millennium Development Goals for 2030: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. These broad global issues that are of particular concern for small island developing states of the Caribbean region. Indeed, many of the problems facing our world today are linked and should be addressed holistically and multilaterally. Today, in various corners of the world, we see masses of people losing faith in the ability of established institutions to defend their interests or to respond adequately to their needs. Almost on a daily basis, we witness increasing incidents of violence perpetrated against innocent people. We look on seemingly helpless as large groups of people are alienated and isolated in their own countries, some forced to uproot their families and risk their lives to escape armed conflicts in search of security and better opportunities. It is clear that the root cause of many of these problems can be attributed to years of social neglect and entrenched economic inequities. We simply cannot resolve these problems by dismissing their fears, stereotyping, resorting to isolationism, xenophobia, and protectionism. Our response must be to develop greater partnership and find common ground. Global challenges demand that we build bridges, not walls. We must strengthen our commitment to multilateralism and cooperation. We must empower international institutions, civil society, and the private sector to play a much greater role. The Sustainable Development Goals prove a perfect platform and framework for achieving this in partnership. Mr. President, of critical importance to the transformation of our world is the empowerment of our young people. There is a common view that significant intervention is required in order to nurture aspiration, vision, leadership, and a sense of civic responsibility. By providing opportunities for their constructive engagement in critical matters that directly affect them and society, we can transform their frustration to meaningful empowerment. We should tackle head-on the increased incidence of youth and youth violence. Youth violence is invariably symptomatic of deeper societal issues. We cannot dismiss the apparent despair of the youth. We have to find ways to make them see that violence is not the answer by adopting a multi-sectoral and integrated approach. In St. Kitts and Nevis, we are focused on job creation, skills enhancement, entrepreneurship, counseling and support to teen mothers, and the provision of other targeted social services. It is important, Mr. President, that in keeping with our commitment to working more collaboratively to stem the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, the Caribbean governments adopted the CARICOM Declaration on Small Arms and Light Weapons in my own country's capital of Basseterre on July 4, 2011. These weapons have had devastating effects on many young lives and families. St. Kitts and Nevis has now signed and ratified the Arms Trade Treaty, but we are still in need of much support. Mr. President, St. Kitts and Nevis, like so many small island developing states, remains inherently vulnerable due mainly to our small physical size, open economies, diseconomies of scale, and of course small population size. As we have seen time and again, climatic event of a few hours can wreak havoc on every single aspect of life on our islands. We have in the past asked that a strategy to promote climate financing be addressed. I once again reiterate that call. It means nothing to say that billions of dollars are available for climate financing if the mechanisms for accessing them are opaque, prohibitive, and extremely difficult to penetrate. Again, I urge common sense cooperation and partnership. We are being further marginalized in the global financial system. Already in the Caribbean, as of the first half of this year, some 16 banks across 5 countries have lost all or some of their correspondent banking relationships, putting the financial lifeline of these countries at great risk. In our tourism-dependent economies, where remittances factor greatly in national development, such actions threaten to derail progress, undermine trade, direct foreign investment, and the repatriation of business profits. Furthermore, we urge the G7, the G20, and indeed the international financial institutions to reevaluate the methodologies used to assess how and whether a country qualifies for concessional support or access to certain types of international financing. The arbitrary classification of certain small countries like St. Kitts and Nevis, or Dominica for that matter, as middle-income countries can never make sense when one of these countries could grow its economy one year by 4 to 6% and then watch hopelessly when nearly 100% of its GDP is being wiped out by a tropical storm with 6 hours of rainfall. Any new formula must include vulnerability and resilience indices. Mr. President, as the Prime Minister in the quasi-CARICOM cabinet, with lead responsibility for health and human development, I encourage this world body and like-minded governments to join me in re-energizing our efforts in the fight against non-communicable diseases, antimicrobial resistance, as well as communicable diseases like HIV/AIDS. This fight is consistent with international efforts to meet our SDG targets. It serves to promote human security, to improve individual choices, and to empower our citizens. St. Kitts and Nevis thanks the United Nations General Assembly for its continued advocacy and support by UNAIDS for the Pan-Caribbean Partnership Against HIV and AIDS, which has been declared and international best practice. We are also proud of the strides that we have made in reducing mother-to-child infection at birth by 97%, and of our efforts to ensure ongoing and more cost-effective access to antiretroviral drugs treatment, and in reducing through education the stigma associated with the disease. But this battle is far from won. The Caribbean still features as one of those areas with a very high prevalence rate. It is essential that more is invested in education to promote healthier lives and healthier food choices, as well as to help people make the right lifestyle choices, because several of these NCDs are indeed preventable. In the long term, by addressing the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs, we reduce the enormous cost of treatments associated with the NCDs, which in turn could significantly contribute to meaningful economic development. Mr. President, it is worth the investment to protect our most critical national asset, that is our people. In all our efforts, people matter most. Mr. President, many of the difficulties I have outlined have been made less burdensome because the government and people of St. Kitts and Nevis have been fortunate to have benefited from some durable and meaningful partnerships. These have been integral to our efforts to build resilience and to transform our country, to modernize our economy, to upgrade our workforce, educate our people, and indeed empower all of our citizens and residents. They are outstanding models of South-South cooperation, worthy of emulation. Cuba's support, for example, to the developing world in education and training, healthcare, agriculture, and heritage development dwarfs the assistance of many economically advanced countries. Venezuela's Bolivarian energy outreach through Petrocaribe is an important model. There must be a greater global commitment to shared prosperity. Additionally, Mr. President, in the last 3 decades, the tangible support of the government and people of Taiwan has been remarkable. Taiwan has stood shoulder to shoulder with the government and people of St. Kitts and Nevis and remains steadfast in its commitment to supporting our determination to meet our people empowerment agenda. Their help and solidarity touch almost every facet of life in our Twin Island Federation. These advantages and benefits should not be limited to a few countries. I know that Taiwan is eager to share its progress and development successes with the rest of the world. I therefore welcome new opportunities for Taiwan and its people to be warmly welcomed and integrated into the international fraternity of nations as a global player whose commitment to the principles of democracy, peace, and people empowerment can touch many more lives. Mr. President, the future of our planet and our citizens cannot be outsourced to any one country or group of countries. These are collective commons that, in today's highly interdependent and integrated world, demand the full participation of all countries and their citizens. Mr. President, allow me lastly to sound a cautionary note. My government, like most of the international community, believes that the recent nuclear tests conducted by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea constitute a threat to peace and security and the Korean Peninsula and the wider international community. Such nuclear tests violate Security Council Resolution 2270 and the well-established regime and non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. St. Kitts and Nevis stands resolutely with those who seek to ensure a peaceful world free of the ravages of war and violence. In closing, Mr. President, despite the many challenges which we face, I am convinced that we can achieve our individual goals by working together as an international community to make the right decisions and triumph over adversity. This is the time for a bolder and grander vision of partnership. As peoples of the world, we join together to celebrate our achievement in the SDGs. As peoples of the world, we achieved the landmark climate deal at COP21. These are examples of what we can do working together for the ultimate benefit of all. Let us now, therefore, resolve to achieve even greater success in the years leading up to 2030. I thank you.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister, Minister of Sustainable Development, National Security, People Empowerment and Constituency Empowerment of St. Kitts and Nevis for the statement just made, and I request the protocol to escort his